What's good, guys? It's Rey-Jay back with another video. And in this one, I want to break down what's going on with Tesla, SPY, Nvda, the QQQ, and a couple of other tickers. I'm also going to break down why tomorrow is going to be a big day as we have more data coming out, not to mention more potential downside, in my personal opinion, for the indices, for the broader markets, and many tickers out there. Before I break you the devil's information, before I talk about some earnings that just came out and why I believe there's going to be more downside coming very soon, let me just mention a couple of things. I am personally not a financial planner, so take nothing I say as financial advice. And also, if you guys can, please check out the Moomoo link, which is down below and in the description. If you sign up for Moomoo, deposit $100, you're guaranteed 7 free stocks from the Magnificent 7, and the offer ends very soon in just a couple of weeks. Anyways, now let's break down what's happening to the markets. Crystal clear, guys, the market got a huge rejection today. Massive rejection. What happened? Jerome Powell started giving a speech. We got this big push on SPY all the way up to 508. And what happened as soon as the guy was finished? Well, that was basically a move of manipulation. They were manipulating shorts, they were manipulating the stocks out there. And as soon as the guy was done speaking, the market came crashing down. SPY is down. It ended up closing in the red. And I think that with the very bearish looking daily candlestick, we're going to likely see this thing dip all the way down to at least the 493s very soon. So I'm going to break down why that is, how on earth this could be affected by different pieces of data, and why I believe there's more downside likely coming because of what Powell said. So what's happening for tomorrow? Tomorrow is going to be Thursday, May 2nd, 2024. 1 hour before the market opens, we have the exports and imports data, initial jobless claims, and continuing jobless claims data that's coming out. This might cause some volatility, so look and see what this causes 1 hour before the market opens. Initial jobless claims tends to be very important as well. It's important for the Fed's policies. And then moving forward, there's not really much else that's coming out for tomorrow in terms of data, except for like the 4-week and the 8-week bill auctions at 11:30 a.m. The mortgage rates and everything else is very minor. So watch for volatility, mainly at 8:30 a.m. and 11:30 a.m. Eastern Standard Time, an hour before market open and a couple of hours after the market has opened. Now, for other pieces of news, I just wanted to mention that we had Jerome Powell giving a speech today, and he said some very important things. Some things he said were a little bit dovish, just a couple of things, such as him kind of speaking against the notion of us entering economic stagflation. He was trying to say that inflation is under control, at least for the long-term projections, but he also mentioned that he lacks confidence about inflation for the shorter term, right? Looking at the current data. So now the Fed is in a position where the data they're looking at is more important, it's more dire, it's more pivotal than before. And there's no sign of any cuts right now. The Fed did not mention that at all. He didn't rule out. He didn't really rule out like them potentially cutting this year or anything like that. It's more like we just don't know. And he also mentioned that the last couple of inflationary reports were a little bit hot, especially when you look at the data. CPI has been increasing, and you guys can see the same thing that has been happening at least throughout the broader markets. So with all of this happening, the Fed kept rates the same today. And then for the June meeting, there's a 91% chance they're going to keep rates the same. For July, there's currently about, I think, like a 72% chance to keep rates the same. And then for September, if you look at September, there's like a 50-50 chance almost that they either keep rates the same or not. 46% chance they keep rates the same, and there's about a little bit more than that they're going to be cutting. It's almost 50-50, so we're not too sure about how this is going to go. But Powell did say that the Fed has to keep rates higher for longer because inflation is still hot. The Fed had that 2% target. Things are becoming more complicated for the shorter term. The long term, however, is still under control by the Fed, according to Powell. So things are in a very critical place. So with that happening, I would say that the initial move on SPY was just pure manipulation. They pushed it, they hurt shorts, and as people started going long, thinking the market was going to bounce, they smacked it right back down. So this was a big manipulation move. We had this very nice flag that was forming, actually broke below this on the daily time frame, and the daily candlestick looks very bearish. So I do expect more downside as the most likely possibility. That's what's going to likely happen thanks to what Jerome Powell has said. The market is still fearful on the fear and greed index. We're still starting to see things shift. Market momentum is now back to neutral. And then when it comes to the puts and call positioning, one thing that's funny is how when the market started pushing, we saw all these puts getting closed. We saw loads of puts being closed, people going long, buying the dip. And then all of a sudden, what's happening? The market's getting rug pulled again. How funny is that, right? It's doing whatever it can to screw over as many investors as possible. The VIX is also starting to bounce a bit. It hasn't gone a breakout yet, but it is starting to bounce off its 50 daily moving average. So we have to give this some time. Now, there's another big factor for tomorrow. We have Apple's earnings. So for tomorrow, in the morning, we have Peloton and Moderna. And after the market closes tomorrow, we have Aapl and Coinbase. We'll have to see how these end up doing. Aapl will affect the market for Friday. But for today, there wasn't really much that came out after the market closed, except for just like Carvana. Carvana is on fire. The shares are up 30% because their overall quarter was very, very good for the first quarter. EPS was 23 cents above the expectations, and then revenue was $3.06 billion above the 2.67 billion expected. So very, very nice beat on EPS and revenue. On top of this, they had pretty good guidance and very, very nice growth overall. That's why the share price is up quite a bit. With that being said, let's talk about the stocks. Let's talk about how the market's moving. So when it comes to the market, if you look at SPY right here, this thing popped and then dropped and got this big rejection. And I believe that there is a risk of this dipping lower. We got a big break from this bear flag that was forming, and we are looking like we're going to likely see downside coming very soon. Now, we might not just crash immediately because you have to remember that Jerome Powell was very uncertain about policy. He was saying that the Fed has work to be done. And he did say things which are not the best, at least in terms of what investors would probably want to hear. He mentioned that he's not entirely confident about how things are looking for inflation. This looks like a very, very broken looking head and shoulders, kind of like this is like a left shoulder, this is like a head, and this is like a right shoulder, even though this is like really, really quick. So what I'm anticipating is this is going to likely try to push a little bit higher. SPY is going to push into the low 500s, but this is another trap, guys. It's going to grab more liquidity one more time. Then we're going to likely see a move easily down to 497. If that fails us, I think this gap is going to fill all the way down to about the 494 area. And then 493 is where we had the last bounce. So I think 493 is our support. I think we're going to be testing this within the next couple of days, and I favor more downside for SPY. Look for a little rebound initially. Okay, they're going to still try to grab liquidity. They're going to still try to trigger some stops. The market's not as simple as it just like crashes in one day. But I think that what's going to happen is we might get a little pop initially, and then we're going to continue lower. Look at resistance right over here near our 20 EMA at this 502 to 504 area. Then we have 506. And then if we end up losing support, look at 500. If we lose this, there's going to be 497 as our next target. And then losing that will take us all the way down towards 493. I think, once again, guys, the same thing is going to happen like yesterday. We get a little pop, and then we're going to end up losing the gains. The bears are going to step in, and I think that Jerome Powell is still causing some fear. Why is he causing some fear? Because once again, he mentioned that inflation is still high. The Fed has work to do. And even though he did try to kind of like negate a lot of the opposing arguments about stagflation and things like that, it still wasn't enough, in my opinion. I think that he made it very clear the Fed has a lot of work to do. He made it clear that inflation is still hot, and the Fed is now just super dependent on data. They're going to be so dependent to the point where they don't even know if they're going to cut this year. In my personal opinion, they don't truly know that. So it's very, very tricky. And with all of this happening, it's going to be key for how the market is moving. So just to be clear, look for a little rebound. We're going to grab liquidity. Then I do anticipate more downside that's potentially coming. We have this nice flag that was forming. You guys can see a SPY actually broke through this. Let me just draw this out real quick for you. So this was what was forming on SPY, this nice little flag like this. And then SPY has just broken through these supports. We're trying to hold the support right here, and we kind of failed right here. So you guys can see we attempted to get back in, and we kind of failed and rejected. Now we're closing below our flag. So we are favoring bears a bit more, in my personal opinion. Now, what about for the triple Q? It's almost identical to SPY, guys. Almost identical. Nasty looking daily candlestick, by the way. In fact, let me just pull up the daily time frame just real quick before I show you guys this. When you look at the daily like this, I'm going to hide all indicators, by the way. Let me just hide this. Give me 1 second. So just like SPY, this was trying to grab liquidity. We got this nice little pop and Powell was speaking. And as the guy started speaking, we got this huge rejection also. I wouldn't be surprised if this thing continues to fall to lower levels. This could fall easily all the way down to 418 all over again, if not below that. And I do think that we're getting a break from this nice little flag right here. So I'll make this more clear in just a minute. So just like SPY, I anticipate more downside as a strong possibility. But we might pop a little bit first before the move to the downside starts. So I still anticipate downside as a strong possibility. Here's why. So we could take this chart, right? Draw out this pattern just like this. And what you'll see is that we attempted to maintain the structure and then we ended up failing. So it was an attempt and a fail. It failed to hold up very, very well. And we're just kind of stuck around these areas. So you guys could see we had this flag that was forming on the QQQ, the NASDAQ as well. We kind of broke back into it before getting a big rejection. And now we're just continuing to look weak. I personally believe that just like SPY, this kind of resembles a broken head and shoulders. It's not perfect, right? This is like a left shoulder here. This is like a head. This is a broken right shoulder. So look for a little pop. Look for a lower high to be established relative to this high. Could get close to 425. Then look for a big rejection. I wouldn't be surprised if we continue to fall all the way down to at least 418. If that fails us, watch for 413, then 410. So I anticipate more downside for the triple Q, and I think that's going to resemble SPY as the most likely possibility. If you want to be bullish, you want to see it break past 430, but I find that to be very unlikely. And I think the daily chart is giving us the bigger story. How about for Tesla? How is the notorious Tesla stock looking, in my opinion? Well, it's very similar to SPY and the others, unfortunately. So when you zoom out like this and look at the daily time frame, sadly for Tesla, we've been kind of bearish for the last couple of days with bearish news and also Jerome Powell. And notice how we attempted to balance and got a big rejection, and we have this big gap to fill. So Tesla could continue to slowly dip to fill this gap. I'll be watching support at 177. However, you guys can see right here we had this previous resistance becoming support. And if we lose that, it could easily come down to 168. So you want to be very, very careful. Now, looking at, let's just double check this, the hourly time frame. I'm noticing that we're looking, excuse me, we're looking kind of weak on Tesla. There's a downtrend, right? We had this high up here, came down, made a lower high, came down, made a lower high, came down. It's continuing to fall. Now, we have a strong support, 178, of course, but we'll have to see if Tesla could hold this or not. That's where we have the previous resistance. So I think just like the market, watch 182 for Tesla might try to rebound a little bit. Maybe it goes a little bit higher, but then there is the risk of it dipping again. I think this could be forming like a head and shoulders. This is our left shoulder. This is the head and then the right shoulder is forming. Might come back up towards 183, then start dipping down towards 178, and then a bigger move to the downside could be coming to 175 on Tesla, sadly. It is what it is, guys. I know a lot of people don't want to hear that, but it is what it is. I have to be as honest as possible. To turn bullish, I want to see this thing break past 186. If it does break that, then I will switch my view, but it's so far making lower highs and lower lows. We got a big rejection thanks to Powell. And remember, Tesla's heavily influenced by rate hike decisions and the interest rates, so that's not the best of news for them. Look for a pop and drop like structure. I still find that to be very, very probable. For Nvda, I'm seeing something very, very similar. Now, notice that Nvda also tried to pop a bit. It went all the way up towards 860, then it collapsed all the way back down to the 820s. Not the best of moves. Look at the last few days. It's been we had this high here, came down, made a lower high, came down, made a lower high, came down. We tried to break the high, then we rejected. So not looking that great. It's not looking as weak as other stocks out there, but I am seeing a little bit of weakness, especially on the daily time frame. So I wouldn't be surprised if we actually see Nvidia fall a little bit, especially because we're losing our flag right over here that was forming, similar to that of the QQQ. So I think that Nvidia is going to likely dip a little bit. It might pop in the beginning of the day tomorrow, retest our 20 EMA. I wouldn't be surprised if we go all the way up to about 844 or so, maybe a little bit higher. And then we just continue to fall and make our way down towards 820 all over again. So look for a little pop and drop like move, and we might just continue to fall as the most likely possibility. For Apple stock, now this is a little bit different. We look kind of weak on the daily, so it might dip a little bit, but do not be too afraid because despite the fact that Apple's looking like this, we'll be watching 169 as support. Losing this would dip things all the way down towards 168 or lower. Resistance watch 170. If we break that, we could push up to 172. We might rebound a little bit on Apple, then continue to fall, but the daily looks pretty weak. I think there's a good chance it's going to dip a little bit tomorrow. Now, that's just one factor, at least based off technicals. Do not forget that Apple has earnings tomorrow after the market closes, so we'll have to see what that ends up causing. That could still lead to a dip, so we'll have to see if that ends up being the case, but I do favor some downside as a strong possibility, so make sure you keep that in the back of your mind. With that being said, now I want to talk about some other tickers and break down more details about them. I'm going to try to be a little bit more quick from this part. Palantir is showing some life. It could actually try to retest this resistance right over here at 22.35. But then if we get a rejection here, we could start dipping back down to 21.63. So I do see that as a possibility. A little pop and drop like move. I think the whole market's going to follow this trend. As predicted, Supermicro is down very, very hard. Look for a retest of about 754 before it continues lower, and it could continue to dip all the way down to the lower 700s. It looks kind of weak. Rivian kind of followed Tesla, trying to rebound a bit, but we have this resistance at our 20 EMA. I think it might pop a bit, retest 9.4 to 9.5, then reject. And we're going to be looking for a move back down towards the $9 flat area. So look for a little bounce and a drop. Watch for that very carefully. For SoFi, SoFi is also trying to rebound. We did talk about this as a strong possibility yesterday. Look for a retest of 7, but I think it might actually reject with the market and start sinking back down towards 6.7. For the IWM Russell 2000, notice how this got a rejection, but it's not looking as weak as SPY. It's been struggling to break past 200, so it could retest 198. I wouldn't rule that out before it continues to drop, but this still kind of resembles a head and shoulders right here on the daily time frame. We have a left shoulder here with the head, and then we have a right shoulder potentially forming. So look for a little pop, a retest of 198, then a rejection. I think we're going to be coming back down to 192 very soon. For AMD, after earnings yesterday, we're actually below our 200 EMA, which is not the best of signs. There's a gap down here to fill at 138, so I do anticipate that might get filled. So be prepared, guys. I think there might be some downside coming as AMD is looking a bit more bearish on this trend, and we're below our 200 EMA. For ARM, we're kind of rejecting here. I do see a double bearish divergence-like structure. I wouldn't be surprised if this continues to dip down to fill its gap down to 93. And eventually, I see the 88 area coming, so I anticipate some downside on ARM. For Coinbase, we're kind of flat right now. We did attempt to get back up towards 210. However, I would still be very careful with this. It depends on news and such. We got rejected off our daily 50 EMA. We might retest that zone. So I wouldn't be surprised if we get close to 220. Then another rejection could come and we could start dipping even lower, all the way down towards 194. That sounds crazy, but I do anticipate a downside move as we are kind of bearish on the trend. Look for a pop and drop, and I do anticipate more downside from there. For Amazon's not looking that great. There's a gap to fill all the way down here towards 173. Might retest the 180 area, 181, then start dipping down to 173 over the next couple of days. I do anticipate that. Meta is kind of flat right now. It might not be as weak because we're trying to base at 430. So it might just, excuse me, it might just trade kind of flat. Look for a retest of 444, then a rejection back down towards 430, and a bounce back up. It might hold that a lot better than the market. So I do see some strength in the stock. For Microsoft, it's just like the market. It might retest 398, then reject. I think it might actually come down towards 390 very soon. It's still looking kind of weak, still looking kind of bearish on the overall trend, and we're still continuing to fall, so it is what it is. For Google, we're looking kind of bearish. We had this big gap up, but now we're slowly falling to fill this gap. Look for a retest of 168 and a move back down towards 165. I do anticipate that for Google. For the VIX is still kind of flat on the daily, but let me just break out how on the 4-hour time frame, the VIX is starting to turn right here, it's trying to hold the support. If we could try to hold above 15, look for a test of 16 very soon. I think we're going to test 16 tomorrow. If it breaks through this, we're going to be looking for a breakout. If we fail to break, we're going to reject. So watch for that test of 16 and see how we end up projecting on the VIX. That's going to be key for the way we move. We'll wait and see. The 10-year treasury yield is coming down a little bit. We'll see if this bounces or not. We're at support at 4.5, so watch to see if we get a bounce. If we get that bounce, this will be a little bearish for the markets, so give this some time. The dollar is down a little bit, but notice that we're at support at, we held support at 105.5. So if we rebound, look for a test of at least 105.8. If we're bearish and lose 105.5, we could dip more, but I think it might try to rebound. So my view of the market is actually in favor of bears. I think that the bears had a big edge today. And I know there was a lot of manipulation, but I think that the odds favor more downside. Look for a little rebound in the morning. The market may try to push to the upside initially, but later on, I do believe that there's a good probability that there's going to be downside that's going to be followed by that. So get ready, guys. Be open-minded and be prepared because, once again, the FOMC meeting was not ideal for, I would say, either side, but Jerome Powell did make a lot of things clear, which are not the best of pieces of news. All right, so thank you for listening. Have a great day, everyone. I want to thank you all so much for listening. I really appreciate every single one of you, and peace out.